are going to spend some time talking with Deonne from Trimble about all the cool things that they're doing and a little bit about their journey. So welcome, have a seat, and we're going to start our fireside chat. Hello.
Hello.
So let's start off here, and I'm going to have, Deonne, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about your journey that got you to where you are here with Trimble?
Sure. So I'm Deonne Ramsey. I'm with Trimble, and most of you probably haven't heard of that company because we are business to business. But we are a global company with over 12,000 employees, so quite a big size. We primarily work in software and hardware services in the industries of like transportation, construction, geospatial. So we're heavily involved with a lot of technology, and we work through that. So I kind of stumbled into recruiting over 25 years ago. I think all of us probably stumbled into it.
Right, that's exactly how it works.
And I started in really the metrics and data side, even back then, just due to my accounting background. And I started in community relations and kind of fell into that after a stint in IT. And then I've done pretty much every job in talent acquisition there is, from recruitment to early career, systems, assessments, even relocations. So I've kind of touched every piece of that. My current role at Trimble is really on the operational side. So really working toward the systems, the technology, processes, automation. So that's what I do today. And my team and I really are the ones that kind of help create that candidate journey, both internally and externally.
And I think that's common for a lot of folks who have been in TA for a while. How many folks in TA here have done all of those things as well, right? We owned Relo and we owned compliance and a whole bunch of other things. So it's exciting that you've been able to bring all of that expertise into your new role.
Yes, and the evolution's been big.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about Trimble and how your people team is set up. Like, how did you decide on the organizational structure that's going to take you into the future?
Yeah, so when I started at Trimble, we were only about 4,000 employees when I started back then. So it's been an evolution. I was the first team member for TA when we started. So Trimble was utilizing a lot of outside services for all of the recruiting. Now we have a team of about 60 that's global. We have dedicated teams for operations and a dedicated team for sourcing. We have early career, and now we've created a mid-career team as well. And we partner very closely with what we call, you all, if say HR, we call people experience, because it's all about the experience now, right? It's not just about all the traditional things that we do. So really becoming those collaborators, the enablers, and the partners across all of PX, which we're part of.
So when you think about your organizational strategy and your goals, what made you all decide that it was time to transform how you looked at talent instead of a more traditional structure of HR?
Yeah, so, and even this past year, I mean, it's been an evolution, and even this past year now, we're part of a whole talent team. So it's not just talent attraction. There's talent planning, there's talent attraction, and it's really, especially with the ebb and flow today, right? A lot of you, I'm sure, you hear the word freeze, we all panic and all of that, and requisitions slow down. But then that's when you focus on the internal side of it. And that's where a lot of the changes has happened. Our internal mobility, I mean, we used to be just below 17%. Now we're over 28% internal mobility.
That's great.
And prior to that, we really didn't know what anybody was interested in until they applied. We had no clue. We had no picture of what they're looking at and what they wanted to do, unless you talk to every manager. And obviously for a 12,000 employee company, you can't do that. So now we have a picture with using Eightfold of really understanding, okay, these are the skills, this is what they're interested in. If we have a position coming, we can look to say, do we have these skills internally? Can we grow somebody? And then we can start at that early career level and really kind of develop, and I always say grow our own.
Smart. Mm-hmm. Smart. So if we think about what it takes to transform an organization, it doesn't happen overnight. You don't say, hey, guess what? Now we have Eightfold. Oh, all is rosy. Like, we would love it if that's how it worked. But how did you talk about not just change management, but transforming the mindsets of folks to be able to focus now on that internal mobility, hiring managers being open to it, that transparency?
And it was more than just the hiring managers. It's really putting the onus on the employees to own that. So, but how do you do that? Like, again, it's like, what's in it for them? And we utilized a lot, like we utilized our employee resource networks. They are a big component and advocates for us as we're utilizing all of this. We have some programs. Of course, you know, being a big company, we have lots of little acronyms and stuff. We call it Fast Track, which is Trimble's Recruiting Accelerating Careers. We have what's called Change Ready. So all of you probably do a performance review and you have high potential. And then you have this box, right? These are the people that are ready for change. So we actually had some talent advisors do like a personal thing with each one of the Change Ready. Made sure they had a profile, made sure we understand what they wanted to do. And then they became advocates as well. So it was just really one at a time, but it really, like, when you put it on the employees, they became your marketing people. Instead of you saying, oh, you should do this, or you go, so it was really just utilizing really an internal marketing plan.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and putting that not just the focus, but also the empowerment, right? You have the ability to control your career. Feels very empowering instead of, well, it's up to you, figure it out, right? You've put those pieces in place.
And I mean, when you go to the Career Hub, you have a visual, right? And the majority of people are visual, right? So when you go into the Career Hub, you see something different. There's a way to network. You can kind of see what's going on, and the employees liked it, and our hiring managers really liked the system. You know, we had a few that really wanted to micromanage. You know, we all do have that, right? But now, like, all the managers really want to get in there and play with it and look at it, and they're like, yes. So it's exciting because, well, it is something new, right? But then it's evolving. So every time we go in, there's something, and our talent advisors have really helped market that. Our people experience partners have really helped. So it's really, the onus has been on the employees to really kind of, we always say, drive the bus yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
So how have you talked about the focus on skills rather than on a particular background to help folks be a little bit more open to what that next journey looks like?
Yeah, and that was, again, kind of that marketing piece, right? Because traditionally it's like, well, I don't need to go create a profile, right, until I'm looking for a job, right? And it's like, no, you really should create a profile and see what's out there, see where your skill gaps are. And it really helps us too, as I mentioned, like when we have an opening coming up, we can go in and see now, do we have this skill internally? If we have, with technology changing so fast, like what do we have inside right now and what don't we have? So it helps us even from a roadmap standpoint technically, and it helps us become more proactive instead of reactive. How many of you are reactive? Mm-hmm. Most of us are when it comes to recruitment. So this helps kind of drive that proactivity for us.
So let's talk a little bit about looking outside of just I'm in this position and now I want to go to that position. Mm-hmm. So what do you do in terms of projects or gigs or ways to get that cross-functional experience as well, outside of just going from a one-to-one?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. We call them gigs. So in the system, they're called projects. But they are short-term assignments for our internal employees. So again, they can go in and, kind of like the example this morning, they can apply and say, oh, I don't have this skill. So how do I get this skill? So again, the onus is put back on them to really kind of review that. And then we have, all of the alerts that go out to say, there's a gig assignment. We have our education and our learning management system also combined with it to say, hey, here's a class coming up. Maybe you might want to take it if this is something you're interested in. So it really helps with a lot of that. And again, it's not our PX partners that have to drive that. It puts them into the driver's seat to really kind of drive their own career path.
Sounds like a great partnership too inside of your internal people experience team, your hiring managers, your employees. Feels like they're working together, maybe more than they have in the past.
It does, and really to be transparent, like before we had Eightfold, like our job advertisements are not the greatest, I'll be honest. So, with Eightfold, it really helps because it helps kind of, it gives you that picture, again, that visual, and the managers look at it and say, well, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what you wrote. So let's fix that. And it also provides that content even for the candidates, right? So they can go in there and see that. So it really helps kind of drive some of that relationship because now it's not just us telling you, this is not what you're looking for. Yes, it is. But now it's like, here's the data and the proof behind it.
Right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the talent attraction strategy. Now, has that changed because you have a stronger talent management process and internal mobility?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is with the proactiveness, right? So now the events is a big thing for us, right? So now we're showing up like a technology company. So we have our iPads and we can interview people like right away. We can do campaigns. We can, set up communities to really kind of do a lot of that proactive recruiting. As candidates apply, they can set up a skills assessment. Our internal people can also. So it really helps us really tie into each one of those candidates a lot quicker. And, we're not high volume recruiting though. So, it's putting that out there. We are very technical in nature. So it does help us really zero in on that talent a lot faster. Filtering, I can tell you our recruiters love the filtering features within,
right.
Especially with a lot of our OKRs and diversity initiatives and all that. So it really helps them filter in. And, I will say a lot when COVID happened, right? Everything went remote and hybrid. Like we were ready for that. So a lot of people were struggling, but because we had that, we were able to really utilize that to really kind of find that talent and zero in.
Pivot really quickly, which I think a lot of us found after the pandemic, things shifted so dramatically that folks were scrambling in a lot of ways, trying to figure out how do we catch up. So that's amazing. I think it's going to also happen that candidates now are not just going to look for a position, they're going to look for what happens once I get in the doors. How am I going to be able to move, right? We're starting to hear a lot more of those questions of, well, okay, great, what's my next step? And you have a plan to say, well, there's all kinds of steps. It doesn't have to look like a career ladder anymore. It could be moving between a whole bunch of different positions in different ways to get you, as an employee, what you're looking for, as opposed to saying, well, you go from here to here to here to here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where, and we have not turned this on yet, to be transparent. It's that career navigator. We're looking at it. We're trying to figure out what makes sense. So again, giving the keys to the bus to the employee to say, okay, what road do you want to take? And you can go do that. But, obviously you have to set up the infrastructure. I heard a speaker talk, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and they were saying, you can get technology to make the process faster, but if you don't fix the process, it's not going to be any better.
It's just a Band-Aid, right?
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's right. So let's take a step back and talk a little bit about the difference between people analytics, right, or data analytics, and talent intelligence, and what's that journey looks like, right? So if we think about data analytics, that's about using the information inside of your organization to get some insights, draw some conclusions. Talent intelligence is a very different definition, right? Thinking about using a dynamic way of looking at data to help make decisions. So it's putting you in the proactive seat instead of the reactive seat. So talk to me a little bit about the talent intelligence journey and how you decided to go down that path as opposed to using your data to make some reactive conclusions.
Yeah, and we're still going down that path like everybody else.
I think everybody else
right?
is right, yeah.
We're still there. But, it's not just about quantitative data anymore. There's that qualitative piece, and you have to really be able to tell those stories based on the data, not just grabbing. And it's not about the traditional data anymore either.
That's right.
So that's where the talent intelligence helps. And then how do you tell that story out? And then how do you use that information? And that's the piece we're still driving or trying to get there. And I think just like with everybody else, at least we're on the road getting there. But yeah, there's some definite things we need to do going forward.
Yeah, which is what makes it exciting, right? There's
Yes.
a little bit of the unknown, a little bit of the art of the possible. So are you then working on those design sessions? I'm guessing probably not 1-2 years down the road. You're probably
No,
thinking
we're working on it now.
3, 5,
Right.
7 years down the road. And who knows what that's going to look like, right? At the rate of change.
Yes.
But just as you said, you were prepared for the pandemic. Of course, you didn't predict it, right? But you
Right.
were like, hey, we were already ahead of the trend. How do you continue to do that to make sure that you're not going to get caught off guard? That's a lot of what we
Right.
hear about, is that agility.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's a data cleansing exercise too, right? So garbage in, garbage out. I think someone else has said, I think Jamie said in our last one, and that's what we're doing a lot of, is how do we cleanse the data? How do we make sure that what we're pulling out is correct and accurate? And then how do we use that and tell that story?
Right. So I wanted to ask earlier, and I forgot to, how are your employees reacting to having this? Like, it might be scary. I think an old school method is you just tell me what my next step is, right? I'm going to get tapped on the shoulder for that, and there isn't a lot of activity owned by the employee. So what are you hearing from the employees? And have you seen any reduction in folks leaving because now you have a plan to get them to the next step?
Our attrition slowed down, but obviously we don't know if it's the system or the economy, obviously.
Can we just say the system?
We can say
okay,
it's the
no, I'm
system
just
for you. But, our internal mobility has definitely gone up extremely. And, what we get from employees, it's intuitive. It's very easy to use. It's still that personal approach, though, to show them what's in it for them. So it's a journey. I would say, our adoption rate has been very high, and it keeps increasing. I think what we're struggling with, just to be transparent, is they're in there. They might not always go back in, right? So they go in and they set it up and say, oh, this is cool, but how do you get them to keep going in? So that's the piece that we're trying to figure out. So we're, working on some initiatives of like, how do we do like internal employee campaigns?
Yeah, exactly.
And, send out information and not only just, we don't want you to apply, but even if you refer somebody or, networking and all of that. So just the what's in it for me thing, just kind of continuing that.
And thinking about what does that look like for personalized content, right? We used to say, go out to your intranet and you can see, things that are
Right.
more generic. How do you continue to serve up that personalized content that meets you where you are? So I think that's a challenge that a lot of folks are trying to figure out. What does that personalized
Right.
internal content look like? Not very many teams have, somebody specifically dedicated to internal content development
Right.
for that.
Well, and just like the keynote speaker, right? He's like, we have so many systems. Like, what's going to make you go to the Eightfold system? So it's just really trying to drive that content.
Yeah. So let's talk about if you have any secret ingredients or secrets that you'd be willing to share or best practices about that transformation journey. Any learnings that you had when you started, things that you might say, loved that we did that, or might not do that again?
I think the personal approach has helped the most, really utilizing the employee resource networking. So we've gotten them to be our advocates instead of us. Just putting an announcement out saying, go do this, did not work.
You tell me to do it, I'm not doing it.
No, I'm not doing it. I don't understand. But really explaining the why behind it. So again, it's really when you have an employee say, well, I'm not looking for a job, so I don't really care. So how do you get that in front of them to get them to understand that we're also looking at you, even if you're not looking for a job, and this is your way. You can use this as part of your performance review. You can use this to track your information for your performance review, because how many of you, you do that annually and you're like, oh, I remember the last 3 months, but what did I do this 6 months before that, because I can't remember. So this is a good way to kind of put some of those goals in. You can kind of go see what classes I took, and really trying to get them to understand, again, what's in it for me, what can I use this for, and really doing that as a personalized approach has helped the most, and obviously that's going to take a lot of time. So right. I think we're at 60% of our employees are in there, but getting the returning visitors is what we're trying to figure out. How do we get them back?
Yeah, and how do you almost set that up as your own, and LinkedIn is the same way, right? It's your
right.
own internal LinkedIn. But a lot of folks look at LinkedIn too, like I only go out there and update it when I'm looking for something new. Mm-hmm. So being that proactive approach, but then also being able to share too about, hey, this might be a cross-functional opportunity. You may not be looking for a gig, but somebody may be looking for the skill sets right. that you have to help make the organization better, not just in your particular department.
Right, and just networking, finding out, like I found out someone in Indiana was a big Ohio State fan, which I'm Ohio, so I'm like, oh, cool. So, it gives you something to talk to your co-employee, your employees about,
especially
right?
if you're more remote,
exactly.
right? Developing those relationships.
Another way to relate, right?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so one more question before we do the final, give me your best of the best. Is there any metrics or anything that you captured or learned during the process that you're either surprised at or maybe most proud of as you went through what that talent intelligence process looked like?
The internal mobility is definitely the biggest thing that we're really proud of. Going from almost doubling our internal mobility. And that was a big deal to us because our employee engagement survey, that was one of the things we were really, our employees were saying there's no career advancement. We've had a lot of boomerangs at Trimble. And it's like, why would we want them to leave and go get that knowledge?
You don't want that to be a thing anymore.
No,
yes.
We don't want them to go somewhere else to get some of that knowledge and stuff and then come back. It's like, how can we grow them? And that's where we have our teams. We have an early career team. A new team just created for the mid-career to start looking at that and say, what can we do to even help mid-career people of, maybe there's a rotation, maybe there's a gap. And, some of that Career Hub information is going to help kind of guide, here's the gaps, right?
Right.
What can we do to get there? And especially with the new technology and such.
And I think there's something around that mid-career level too of not everybody wants to promote, right? When you get to that space, there's some folks who are like, I just want to do this forever until I retire or get bored or something, right? So how do you just determine?
Traditionally, it was like, oh, I'm going into a manager role. Not everybody wants a manager role.
That's right. And how do you say, okay, you're going to be a high PO or a high pro. You're going to put them in the high pro section, right? And then the other folks who want to move up, that's great. Sometimes you need those steady eddies who are just really good at what they do and give them that recognition that it's okay if you don't move on. We're going to acknowledge where you are in your journey, and we're going to continue to pour into you. So maybe their role doesn't go up a ladder, but maybe it expands, or maybe you pull them in as a mentor. So lots of cool ways to use that middle career. I like that. All right, so we're coming to the last question here. So your last little bit of wisdom. What would you share with the audience here on a tip or 2 or 3, depending on what you have, on how to get started on that talent intelligence journey? What does that look like? Some best practices, maybe some ways just to get started.
Yeah, it's really just figuring out what that proactive approach is for your company and developing that strategy, and really that personal approach is really what works. So a general directive to say, hey, go do this isn't going to work. So really understanding your audience. It is like an internal marketing that you have to do internally for your employees, and making them, as I mentioned before, it's about feelings now. It's like making them feel good about it, and hey, you want to do this and this is why. And then what are you doing with it? Because if they're just going out and doing it and hearing nothing, they're not going to come back either.
Right. Tech for tech's sake doesn't make sense. You've got to have an outcome and a goal that you're trying to accomplish.
Yep. And then how does that relate with your other systems? So even defining that roadmap for your employees to understand that because that's where they're like, well, I put it in this system. Why do I have to put it in this system? And like how does that relate and what does that mean to them? So really just defining that and just being a lot more transparent helps a lot.
Yeah, one of the things that we've talked a lot about inside of Eightfold is either tool fatigue or tool sprawl, right? Like there's just almost too many options out there, and so people get paralyzed and are like, I'm not going to do any of it. I'm just going to sit here. So I think that's a great idea. All right, well, round of applause here for Deonne. Thank you so much for joining us.